There we go. Hey, it's lovely to be, you really do look beautiful, honestly. The Lord Mayor was absolutely right. It's a fantastic joy to be with you today. Some of you have asked about Care for the Family, and first of all, let me say this. If you see anything that we sell, you have to go on our website, no matter how expensive it is, and for any reason you can't afford it, if you drop us a line, we'll gladly, whatever it is, send it to you free of charge. The royalties from my family books go into a charitable trust. If any of you want to become partners with Care for the Family, what you do is this. You take that little form, you see it there? Take that little form, fill it in the back, give something a month. It doesn't matter how small it is, fill it in. If you can't remember all your bank details, don't worry, sign it. And during the coffee break, I'll be out there. If you're able to do that, we got a bit of a thank you for you, a bit more than a little one, to say thank you to that. We got these packs out there. There's me speaking about marriage, 8 sessions on marriage. Me speaking about parenting, boundaries, discipline, all that kind of stuff. Me speaking about the teenagers. Anybody here with teenagers? If you've got kids of 5, 6, 7, and 8, it's a great time to watch that DVD. And then a little book I wrote with my son Lloyd when he was 17. If you've got more than 2 kids, you will have chalk and cheese. That's particularly galling if the first one is compliant, because for a while you think you're a great parent. Actually, you just got lucky. Katie, my first one, was wonderful. First thing Katie did was apologize to the midwife for being slightly late. So for a while, we honestly thought we were great parents. Lloyd came into the world smoking a cigar. And when he was 17, he said, "Dad, let's write a book together," which is remarkable, because so far as I know, Lloyd has never read a book. And he wrote this book about silly things that parents say to kids. And I said, "Well, things like what?" And he said things like this. "Would you like a smack? Don't come running to me if you break your leg. Well, where did you lose it?" We argued over whether I said this last one. He said, "Dad used to say to me when I was 2 years old, 'Don't be childish.'" You might like a copy of that. And then my book, the 60-minute, copy of my book, The 60-Minute Family. Incidentally, I'd love to sign a copy of one of these books for you personally. If you're able to become a partner with us, I'll be out there in the interval. And then my final book, it's a hardback book called The Wisdom House. My mum could only just read and write. But when I was a little boy, she'd tell me a story of a land far away. And when people got on a bit in life, they wrote a life lesson. And they rolled it up in a scroll and put it in a big hut in the middle of the village. And once in a while, the older people would gather around and the young people would come out and they'd read to the young one of the stories that the older people had written. And they called that place the Wisdom House. I got 5 grandchildren. I like being a grandparent. Frankly, if I'd known grandkids were so much fun, I'd have had them first. And in my study, I got these 2 big leather armchairs. And I imagine my grandkids coming in when they were grown and sitting in that old leather armchair. Perhaps somebody had broken their heart. Perhaps somebody had trodden all of their dreams. Perhaps they were about to get married or buy their first house, so they were in debt, and they and me would talk. And I wrote a book, whether you're 18 or 88, called The Wisdom House. And so the partnership table's out there, just on the right. In the coffee interval, I'll be there. If you fancy becoming a partner with us, fill the little form and bring it there. Take those things as my thank you to you. But remember this above all. If you can't afford any of the stuff we sell, drop us a line and we'll send it to you free. I am loving being here with you today. You're a pretty daunting audience, to be honest. Somebody said to me, it's like Daniel going to the lion's den. But it's a nice den to come into. And I want to start by telling you my favorite love story. It happened just before the outbreak of the last World War. And a man called John Blanchard is in a library in New York, and he's reading a book. And as he reads the book, he sees some writing in the right-hand column. It's a woman's handwriting, almost certainly. And he goes to the front of the book, and there's a woman's name and address, Hollis Meynell. And he writes to Hollis, and she writes back, and then he's called away to the war in Europe. And they keep up this correspondence, and after a while, he almost feels he's fallen in love with her. And he says, "I'd like to see what you look like. Our title is True Beauty. And of course he wants to see if he thinks she's beautiful. We know that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but he wants to know. Please send me a photograph. I'd like to see what you look like. No, she said. If you really cared for me, it shouldn't matter what I look like. Well, he found that rather hard, but he kept right into her, and after about 6 months, it seemed that she was falling in love with him. And that gave him the courage to ask again. Send me a photograph. I'd like to see what you look like. No, she said. It shouldn't matter what I look like. After 11 months, it was time for his first furlough, and he was coming back to New York, and he wrote to Hollis and said, will you meet me? She said, I will. Grand Central Station, New York, Christmas Eve. He said, how will I recognize you? She said, I'll wear a red rose in my right lapel. She wrote back, how will I recognize you? He said, well, I'll be in my uniform, but I'll hold high above my head the book you wrote the notes in. Well, imagine it. He's quite in love with this woman, but he's never seen her. And John Blanchard takes up the story. He says, I walk into Grand Central Station, New York, and there are thousands of people milling around, and I'm looking for this woman who's captured my heart. And suddenly, out of the crowd steps this young woman. She's got long, fair hair. She had a green suit on. He later told a friend, it seemed that springtime was bursting out of her. He said, I was captivated. So captivated, he said, I omitted to notice she was not wearing a rose. She jiggled her hip. She smiled at me. She said, going my way, soldier? He said, I desperately wanted to follow her. And then out of the corner of my eye, I saw the woman with the rose. She was older, much older than I thought she'd be. She had a sensible little brown knitted hat on that made its way down to a sensible long brown overcoat, sensible brown flat shoes, a little cane and glasses. He said, I desperately wanted to follow the young woman in green. But I thought, no. No, this woman has sustained me through the long months of the war. This won't be romance, but it might be something deeper. He said, I did not hesitate. I walked up to her, I saluted, I said, you must be Hollis Maynell. Could I take you to dinner? The older woman half smiled, half scowled. Young man, she said, I've no idea what all this is about. But the woman in green who just went by begged me to wear this rose. And she said, if you were to invite me to dinner, she'd be waiting for you in the big restaurant across the road. Apparently, young man, it was some kind of test. Hollis Maynell was bright. She knew that one day even her great looks would fade. Hollis was looking for a man who at least some level could love anyway. Women, this is the search of our hearts. To find somebody who will love us anyway. Tall, thin, fat, slim, wealthy, poor, older, young, will love us anyway. This is the search of our hearts as human beings. All over the world, I ask parents, what is the greatest gift you can give a child? And all over the world, from Bangkok, and I've spoken to 1 million people in events, from Bangkok to Borneo, from New York to Newark, parents say the same, love is the greatest gift. And I think they're right, but there's another gift. And if this gift is not given, a child will never believe they are loved. A man or woman can never believe they are loved. It is the gift of acceptance. I think now of a woman, she's 40 years old. She's slim, she's attractive, she looks half her age. And a daughter of 14 comes into the room, slightly overweight. And in my presence, this woman says to her own daughter, you know what, Sarah, I'm 40 and you're 14. And giving her a poke in her tubby stomach, she says, and I'm in better shape than you. Does that woman love her daughter? Yes, she does. She would give her life for her. Does she accept her? No. And it will be hard for that child to believe that she is loved. You know, I once saw a school photograph that made me cry. It was of 30 young girls in a class, and smiling out to the camera. But a young girl in the front row seemed apart from the others. She was very overweight. She looked out from behind thick pebble glasses. I said to my friend's daughter, tell me about this child. Oh, they said she's hopeless. She comes last in all the races. She comes last in academic subjects. Nobody ever wants her on her team. She smells a little. Nobody ever wants to sit by her. I felt a tear roll down my face. Frankly, I cry more easily as a man than ever I did as a boy. And I tears rolling down my face. I want to find that child. I want to discover something she's done remotely well and praise her for it. I want to say, I would love to be your friend. Could I sit by you? Could I sit by you? I don't know what you believe or don't believe, but Jesus walked through his life saying to women, you are valued, you are somebody. There's that remarkable, remarkable occasion in Mark's gospel. And there's a woman and she's older and she's ill. And she spent all her money on doctors. And the disease she's got, a blood disease, means under Jewish law, she should have never been out in public. In fact, if she touches you, you have to go home and wash from head to foot. If she sits on your chair, you have to burn the chair. If she lies on your bed, you've got to burn the bed. This woman should have never been out in public. But she hears that Jesus is coming to town. And she knows in him is not only her only hope, but her last hope. And somehow she gets the courage to go out again amongst people. And she sees him walking by in the crowds, and she just reaches out. She can't get too near, but she touches the edge of his coat as he goes by, and suddenly, it's as if the film freezes. Everything stops. And he says, who touched me? And she comes forward, and the whole story spills out. And he looks her in the eye, and you know what he says to her? Daughter, your faith has made you well. Do you know what he is saying to her? The Messiah bursts into space and time and history. He's saying to this woman that nobody wants to touch. You are somebody. You are special. I accept you. What an incredible gift that is. And if you and I are to know true beauty, we have to change judgmentalism for acceptance. Stop judging others. Refuse to be judged. That we are accepted by God. That we are loved. And we have to somehow change worthlessness for significance. I've been married, I don't know how long, 43 years, I think, something like that. And you know, when we'd been married for a short time, there was a knock on our door one winter's evening. I opened the door. There's a man standing there. I kind of recognize him. He used to come to our little Sunday school. My parents didn't go to church, but they sent us to a little gospel hall on the corner of our street. And this guy used to come there, slightly educationally challenged. He didn't have a family of his own. He used to live in a care home. And the Sunday school superintendent would go and get Ronnie and bring him to Sunday school. And we would torment him for an hour with all the cruelty that children can bring. And then the Sunday school superintendent would take him back to the care home. And Ronnie left the care home when he was 16. But now he's a man. He's like 27, 28. And he's practically homeless. And he's found out where I live. And I open the door, and he's standing there in the darkness. And in his right hand, he's got a black plastic bag with all his worldly possessions in. And in his left hand, he's got a frozen chicken. I say, Ronnie, where'd you get your chicken? He said, somebody gave it to me for Christmas. I said, do you know how to cook it? He said, no, I don't know how to cook it. I said, come on in, Diane will cook your chicken for you. And she cooked his chicken, and she said, Ronnie, why don't you stay with us tonight? And Ronnie, why don't you stay with us the next night? And don't go home now, it's Christmas Eve. And on Christmas Day, we hurriedly got some presents together that people had given us, some socks and tie. We gave him a present. He cried. He had never, ever known a family Christmas. And he stayed the next night and the next night and the next night, and he never left. The kids are gone now, grown with kids of their own, but Ronnie's still with us. And when he'd been with us a short time, he got a job as a dustman. Is that what you call them in Belfast? A dustman. And I was a lawyer then. And I used to go into the law practice, and on the way to the law practice, I'd drop Ronnie off in the dust yard. And I'd get home at night, and he'd be sat in a chair giggling, always giggling. And I say, Ronnie, when I get home at night, you're always sat in the chair smiling. What amuses you so much? He said, Rob, when you drop me off in the mornings, the other men say to me, who's that brings you to work in the car? And I say, oh, that's my lawyer. Isn't that nice? Who'd be proud of being taken to work by a lawyer? It wasn't that. You know what it was? Ronnie never had a mother when he was 5 years old taking first day of school. He never had a dad when he was 11 say, how are you going to big school today, son? And now he's a man, but somebody is at the gate. And suddenly he has exchanged worthlessness for significance. Somebody saying, you matter, you are somebody. We need that. And he's great for my humility, actually. In fact, when I became a partner in the law practice, they bought me a nice car, and I was dying to show it off to somebody, so I took Ronnie out for a drive in it. I put my finger on the steering wheel. I said, look at this, Ronnie, how easy it is. It's called power-assisted steering. He said, Rob, I know. We have it on the dust carts. When I was a little boy, my mom and dad didn't go to church. But when I was 4, Miss Williams, the Sunday school teacher, came and knocked my door. And she said to my parents, would any little boys or girls in this house like to come to Sunday school? And my mother said, he'd like to go. And Miss Williams took me down the road, and she led me into the world of Sunday school. She was a single woman. And yet she had thousands of kids. Miss Williams changed my life. Miss Williams taught me about the man who could walk on water. Miss Williams taught me that you could beat giants sometimes in life with just a few stones if you trusted God. Miss Williams told me above all, she used to sing me a little song, Rob, Jesus loves me. I want you to know you are loved. She would say that to me. You are loved. We felt rubbish often. I ended up in a grammar school. I didn't understand it. These kids had toilets. We didn't have an inside toilet. We didn't have running hot water. We didn't have toilet paper. Don't even ask. Except even now, I can't look at a copy of the South Wales Echo without a million memories coming flooding back. If you missed yesterday's edition and somebody bent over, you could practically read the whole thing. And sometimes in life, you just felt rubbish. Miss Williams told me I was special, that God loved me. You are loved. Do you know what? They asked me to speak recently at the 100th anniversary of that church, that little church. And as I leave, not long ago, about 10 years ago, I suppose, somebody pulls my coat. And a voice says, do you remember me? It was Miss Williams. I thought she was 102 when she came to get me when I was 4. Only just stopped myself saying, you're still alive. I'll tell you, there are women in this auditorium, and you are changing people's lives with simple things. But I want you to know that wherever you are and whoever you are, and whether you're religious or not, or whatever you believe or don't believe, I want you to know that you are loved. You might not have been loved by others, but God loves you. You are loved. He comes to you now and says, you are loved. As you are, you and I are loved. This is an incredible thing. Can I tell you another love story? Irving Berlin wrote White Christmas. And when he came to New York in the late 1800s, he was an impoverished young Jewish emigre. His father was a cantor. They sang in the synagogues, but he used to deliver papers. They had no money. Irving Berlin, that wrote some of the greatest love songs ever, they had no money. And he gets a job in a bar, and he learns to play the piano. And he starts to write songs. And one day, in the bar comes a young socialite, Ellen Mackay. She was the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in America, Clarence Mackay, and they fall in love. Irving Berlin falls in love with this socialite. And she says to her father after a while, we want to get married. And he says, no way. No way will you marry this impoverished guy from the wrong side of the tracks. And he sent her to Europe. In fact, he sent her to Europe for a year, and he made a promise she would not speak one word to Irving Berlin, and she promised. And so he's in the States, and she's in Britain, all over Europe, but he writes songs, and they're played on the radio, and she knows they are for her. And he wrote one that said this, I'll be loving you always, not just for an hour, not just for a day, not just for a year, but always. Life may not be fair always. That's when I'll be there always. Not just for an hour, not just for a day, not just for a year, but always. And she knew it was for her. And when she came back to America, they got married. And her father disinherited her. He said, you won't have a penny from me. And then the great crash came of the 1930s, and her father almost lost everything. He was only saved from total bankruptcy by his daughter giving him money from the royalties that her husband had given her from Always. I'll be loving you always. They were married for 65 years. 65 years. 4 kids, 1 died almost at childbirth. Can you imagine the Lord Jesus himself waking you up tomorrow morning and saying to you, I don't know what others have done to you, but I will be loving you always. I love you. I've come into your world. I've died on a cross that you might be forgiven for any wrong. I'll be loving you always. You are loved. We swap judgmentalism for true beauty, and we know acceptance. We swap worthlessness for significance. And you know what? We swap demands for dreams. Sometimes people want to put demands on us. They say, we want you to be like this or like this. If you think you're a scary audience, let me tell you about an even scarier one I addressed not too long ago. You know Rosemary Conley, the fitness guru? She asked me to speak to 250 women that run her health clubs. And they sat in front of me in rippling lycra. To be perfectly honest, you look a lot better than they did. I'll be honest with you. You do. No, really. But they're in front of me in rippling lycra. And I go in and I'm in the front row and I'm ready to speak to them. And my daughter sat next to me, Katie. And a woman gets up to speak. She only speaks for 15 minutes. And she doesn't look much like the women in rippling lycra. But when she finishes speaking, my daughter whispers in my ear, I'll bet you're not looking forward to following her. Which was a great encouragement. But I wasn't, because this is what happens. This woman gets up on stage, and she says, I wasn't any good at school. I didn't pass any exams. But eventually, I get a job as a junior in an office. And this office, their job is to get appointments for clients with managing directors of big companies on the phone, cold calling at a very high level. And she said, one day somebody on the team is ill, and they let me make a phone call, and I get the appointment, and I do another one, and they realize I'm great at this. They put me on the team. She said, it's not a surprise. I'm on the phone always, all the time at home. And then they give me my own team. When I'm 21, I got my own team. And when I'm 23, they say, I want you to go to the New York office. And I'm in New York, and I'm 23 years old. I got my own team, and one day I think, I want to start my own marketing company. And I decide to come back to the United Kingdom and start my own marketing company. And I go into my boss and say, I'm sorry to leave you. He says, Liz, don't go. No, I really want to try myself. And he says, well, I'll give you some work to get you started. She said, I go to the bank. I say, will you lend me £1,000? And they say, no. So I go to the Prince's Trust, and they lend me £1,000. And I say to my father, Dad, can I use your garage as an office? And he says, yes. And I got £1,000, and I got my dad's garage as an office, and I'm 24 years old, and I'm about to start my own marketing company. And I wake up one day, and I'm blind. I am totally blind. And she said, the people after 3 months that look after blind folk come, and they say to me, Liz, how are you going to earn a living? And she said, I'm going to start a marketing company. And they say, no, Liz, we want to talk to you about something called SMART goals. S-M-A-R-T. S is for specific. Your goal and your dream is specific. So that's good, Liz. Measurable. You all want to start in it within 1 year. That's good. You hit that one. A is for achievable. It's not achievable. R is for realistic. It is not achievable. It's not realistic. T is for time-related. Yes, you hit that one. You lose 2 out of 5 goals. This is not a realistic goal, Liz. She said, well, how am I going to make a living? She said, they gave me a choice. I could either be a body masseur or a piano tuner. She said, I've got a tune in my head, and I don't like touching other people's bodies. So I started my marketing company. When Liz Jackson stood up in front of those 250 women, Great Guns Marketing had offices all over the United Kingdom. She'd been voted Young Businesswoman of the Year. She'd been on television with Secret Millionaire. And then she stood up and she said this, ladies and gentlemen, smart goals are pants. Sometimes we need dreams. And I'm telling you, I don't care who you are or what others have said about you, you have a right to your dreams. You don't have a right to them being fulfilled, but you've got a right to try. And some of you have friends or husbands or whatever, or kids sometimes that pour cold water all over your dreams, but you've got a right to your dreams. You've got a right to try, and you never know. In this book that I wrote with my son Lloyd, you know, this one, I told him what it was like going to his parent-teacher evenings when he was a kid. Katie's parent-teacher evenings were a delight. In Katie's parent-teacher evenings, the teachers just wanted to touch me. But in Lloyd's, I remember begging a geography teacher to keep his voice down. Unfortunately for me, just before we published the book, he found a box containing my old school reports. And he published one of them in the book. I'm 14 years old. There are 34 kids in my class. I have come 34th. In those far-off, horrible days, the teachers, and some of you women have been through this, the teachers used to read out the results beginning with the first. Any of you been in a school like that? Horrible, too awful. You kind of hoped you might be in the top 10. And then they got into the teens and your name still wasn't called. And now you're into the 20s and finally the 30s. And ultimately, it was just me left with Arthur Harris. And I look across the class at Arthur, and he looks at me. And then I hear Arthur's name. My teacher writes, a disgraceful report. He's making no use of what little ability he has. I don't argue with that, but what did he know? Did he not know some kids don't get it till later in life? Did he not know that some kids' parents couldn't afford tutors? Did he not know that in a 14-year-old kid, ability can be as much a seed as a full-grown plant? Did he not know that sometimes dreams capture